Supreme Court this week just shut down Louisiana, something like that. The Louisiana hootenanny. What was going on with Louisiana? The let's see, Louisiana law restricting abortions, right? Um, Huge thing. We've got the Supreme Court with two oh that was one of those things. So, this is why I miss in class stuff too, is because the engagement with everybody, especially during the film, getting to hang out and watch together. 2, 3 semesters ago, something like that. 2-ish, 3-ish semesters ago, as we were watching Man of La Mancha, when Pedro beats her to the point where she passes out, beats Aldonza when she comes into the barn, beats her to the point of passing out, and then they're like, "We pack up, we're leaving," and then grabs out. They're like, what should we do with this? Right, referring to it as an object. It. What should we do with this? A person, a human. Aldonza. We take it along. So as the sad music is playing and you see her strumped over one of the mules, and they're walking out. Somebody in the class was just like, years after this event, Pedro would find himself in a position under a conservative-controlled Senate and presidency, finding himself nominated for the next seat on the Supreme Court, and everyone was like, ho, 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 because it was right during the whole Kavanaugh trials thing. But they just said that. They were like, years after this, Pedro would find himself, nominated for a seat on the Supreme Court, and everyone was like, yikes, and I was just like, so we didn't get that, but that memory still sticks out in my mind because it just like undercut that scene so much. But that's what we're talking about here, right? Big oof, yeah. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about literally this presidency, two appointed conservatives, and we've got two major things that have been worrisome. We're looking at workers' rights, and now for abortion. That's a big thing. So let's talk about abortion and what we talk about when we talk about abortion. So as we're looking at something, when we're discussing applied ethics, when we're looking at ethical application, we're looking at issues. So if this is the case, and this is something that Section 5.7 specifically chooses to get into, and why we're talking about it today, the ethical issue, anytime somebody says, what is an issue in philosophy, an issue is just a question being raised. An issue is a question where it's, what's the issue? You're saying, what's the question, right? And the problem is if we start with the question, we're going into that, I wrote down ethical application. If we start with a question, we may think a question can be straightforward, right? We think that a question can be very straightforward, but philosophy will try to tell you and really try to convey and show you that's not the case. It's not so simple. So if I wrote down a question, what should I watch? Seems pretty straightforward. Seems like a pretty matter-of-fact, easy to answer, easy to address question. The issue at hand is me not knowing what I should watch. But is that entirely the issue? And that's what we need to deconstruct as philosophers, or at least philosophically minded. To say, what should I watch, very easily just comes straight forward. And I specifically said should instead of could or would, etc., etc. Should being that ethical sort of ought to. What ought I to watch? What should I watch? Except, can you think of other questions that would impact how I answer this question? And I think, yeah, if you think about this question more, you've got a whole list of other questions that end up not building on this, but constructing not just the way you answer, but the answer you have, right? Am I alone or with people? Are we talking on my computer or are we talking on the TV? Are we talking torrenting things? Or are we talking watching something without a torrent or technically legally, right? Are we talking about renting something from Amazon? Are we talking streaming service? Are we talking cable? Are we talking what's another one? If you're like me and I have the house to myself and I sit down, it's usually just to sit down with a meal, right? Then if you're like me, then it always comes as this sort of gamble. It's like this gamble of how quick can I pick something to watch before my food gets cold because I refuse to take a bite of my dinner until I have selected something to watch and I can sit down and watch it, right? So what should I watch? Well, do I have access to Netflix, Hulu, Amazon, Apple, all the other weird stuff that's now coming out, DC, I don't know, what else? All those different things, Disney Plus. What am I gonna watch? Is it just me? Do I have my kids with me? Because that's gonna impact what I watch. I don't tend to watch grown-up things around them, but I also have a very specific set. Is it just watching by myself, right? Is it Netflix and chill for one? Or is it something else? What am I doing that shapes and then turns out how I answer this question? Multiple things. There is a deconstruction of this question, what should I watch, that then forms the answer to this statement, that then forms a conclusion based on this. It's not so straightforward. I've got limitations. I've got all of the things I need to address first before I then get to answering what I should watch. So, if we're coming to an ethical application, the very first thing we have to do is deconstruct. We have to say, if we've got an issue, again, it's simply just a question. So the issue of abortion, question mark. Abortion? Question mark? I'm Ron Burgundy. If we've got something like abortion, it's not so straightforward. We don't necessarily know what it is we're arguing. We don't necessarily know what it is. It's just not I can have a straightforward answer on this. First thing we need to do is define what we mean by abortion in a clear sense, in a sense that even if you don't agree, you can still recognize the terms of the definition, right? So, what do we talk about with abortion? What is an abortion? You can say terminating a pregnancy. Cool, okay. Normally, that's what that is. At some point, whether there is whatever side, and we'll get onto sides, whatever side you fall on, the unattached definition, because you can then deconstruct and say things like, well, we don't know what a baby is. We don't know when life begins, when personhood begins, etc., etc. So at most, the clearest definition we could say is terminating a pregnancy. Right? Not bringing a pregnancy to term. Terminating. It's interesting because the Bible has a word for abortion, nephil, and sometimes it means ejecting. People are taking it as like, but it's like, context is weird, but ejecting a pregnancy. So ejecting, like that, I just feel like that's like in a cockpit, you pull the, but that's not how it works. That's not how an abortion works. So, okay, well, if terminating a pregnancy is what an abortion is defined as, well, now we've got temporal definitions. Is it terminating a pregnancy when you take a morning after pill? Is it terminating a pregnancy not just when you take a morning after pill, but is contraception itself terminating a pregnancy? You could make that argument because technically it's preventing that pregnancy in the first place. So it's terminating before takeoff, before even taking off. Is pulling out terminating a pregnancy? What about wasting eggs or wasting seed? Put it in such lovely gardening terms. Wasting eggs and seed. Is masturbating or is menstruation terminating a pregnancy? Right? Technically, because if a pregnancy has these definitions, then how far back do we go? Right? No, so it's terminating a pregnancy, and you have to get into those details. Terminating a pregnancy, and at the very least, pregnancy constitutes not preventative, but an active sense of pregnancy means, what is it? When the seed eats away the egg. That's not it. I know that's not it. That's a Always Sunny in Philadelphia joke. When you've got the now fertilized. Fertilized? That's not it either. Fermented? No. What is the F word for it? Not that F word for it. When you've fertilized. Why does it sound so weird when I say that? When you fertilize the egg? Is that what it's called? That can't be what it's called. When the egg is fundamentalized? That's not the word. What is the word? Somebody tell me. What is the word? That's gonna bother me. Terminated pregnancy. So when the egg is it's got to be fertilized. Why does it sound weird to say fertilized? Am I just too stuck in like doing yard work and like stuff like that? Fertilized. It is fertilized. Okay. All right. See, it is fertilized. Yes, a fertilized egg. So a pregnancy would have to be at least that the egg is fertilized, right? So fertilized egg. Fertilized egg. Zygote. The zygote, yes. Très bien, mon capitaine. Yes, the fertilized egg, right? So you've got at least that. Now, what's another part of that argument that we have, that we anticipate with this discussion of abortion? Because you've got terminating a pregnancy, fertilized eggs in a woman. At least one in woman. Right? So we've got terminating a pregnancy is an abortion, which is the pregnancy is fertilized eggs in a woman. So it's, again, an argumentative one way or the other, but at least what we're saying is during these stages of carrying it to term, right? And so this is where we get into, okay, where and why this is an issue, right? Are we arguing what are the other issues? Okay, so a fertilized egg, does that constitute as life? is that something where the reason why abortion is an issue is because this thing growing is a life? Is it an argument of personhood? When does personhood come into being, right? And so we've got this mix already of sorting out what are we talking about when we talk about the issue of abortion. Well, we're talking about more than just terminating a pregnancy. We're talking about concepts of life. We're talking about personhood. So now we have even more things we've got to define, right? When does life start? Do we have a clear definition of when that starts? And here's where, again, we've got personal with our ethical application, and this is going to be a big thing as we're talking. We've got personal. Wow, that's quite a start to that afternoon special. For access to the full video, or to get the full course, or just support me making new content that has everything or nothing to do with what you just watched, head on over to my Patreon, link in the bio. Join the community. I'd love to see you there and have you become a part of something bigger than me, but something where I can play my part just the same. See you there.